Greetings, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. So this video is about the Conservative leadership contest. Well, we're well into the stage of sudden death, and today the next ballot, the second ballot, was held, and Dominic Raab was eliminated. I didn't think he was going to go out. Rory Stewart did much better than expected. Remember, he was ranked bottom of those who survived the first round. So in the recent debate, chaired by Krishnan Gurumurthy, he performed very strongly. Of course, that was broadcast to the public, who don't get to vote. The only people who get to vote at this stage are Conservative members of Parliament, and there are only about 315 of these. Notably, Theresa May is staying out of it. She could try to anoint a successor, but that might well be the kiss of death. I remember when John Major stood down, he endorsed someone, I think he endorsed William Hague actually, and Margaret Thatcher came along and she gave her blessing to him. And some outgoing leaders have done this, and obviously they're within their rights to do so. Anyway, so who's left in the race? It's Rory Stewart, surprisingly, Sajid Javid, Michael Gove, and Jeremy Hunt, as well as, of course, Boris Johnson, who was the front runner in this round as he was in the previous one. Now, there was, as I say, that debate, which Boris Johnson chose not to turn up to yesterday night. Now, why is that? Well, he is a consummate journalist. Remember, he was and is the Daily Telegraph's star columnist. In a notoriously badly paid trade, he manages to earn $500,000 a year. Perhaps Britain's best-known columnist, editor of The Spectator and all the rest of it, media superstar, media ho, indeed. But he knows how to handle a media, and he realised there's a forum that would not favour him. Okay, he was guaranteed to get through to the next round, so play it safe. He stayed away because he thought the others might gang up on him. And he could say, oh, well, I'm addressing Conservative MPs, so the only people can vote. It's sensible. Indeed, that's true. But most politicians will do anything for publicity. As Brendan Behan said, the only bad publicity is an obituary. Anyway, so that's where Rory Stewart did so well. I suppose he got more people to vote for him than otherwise would have done. Now, what's going to happen in this next stage? Well, tonight, Boris Johnson, he did go to the debate, chaired by Emily Maitlis at the BBC. But he was very much on the back foot because the others were challenging him. It was just what he'd feared in the debate the night before. And he did not get a chance to deliver any one-liners. Comedy will not cut it. People don't want a clown as Prime Minister, but that might yet happen. So, as I say, Boris Johnson used to be member of Parliament for Henley, and who had been representing Henley before that for well over 30 years was Michael Heseltine, Deputy Prime Minister, and they know each other, they're friends. Lord Heseltine's gone on the news to say that he likes Boris Johnson dearly because he's hilarious. There are certain similarities between them, even though they're at loggerheads over the European Union. Heseltine, I will give him this. He believes what he says on the European Union. He made up his mind in the 1950s and has been tediously consistent ever since. All right, there's something to be said for consistency, but as the situation changes, you ought to change your mind. Bojo doesn't believe or disbelieve a word he says. He doesn't care. He believes in himself. Well, that's it. He is a naked opportunist. But Heseltine, he told an anecdote about when he first stood as a Conservative candidate in Wales in the 1950s in a rock-solid Labour seat, and he would always challenge the sitting Labour MP to a debate, and the sitting MP would very wisely decline. Why would he turn him down? Because if you're the sitting MP and you're sure to win, there's no reason that you should take part in this debate. It's a gamble. There's no reason you should risk it. If you play it safe, you'll win by a country mile. If you take part in this debate, you might win it fine, in which case you're no better off than you were beforehand. But there's just a chance that the upstart candidate might trip you up, you might be publicly humiliated, it could be a catastrophe, and you could lose. So play it safe, don't risk it. And so Bojo chose not to make himself vulnerable. But he's not so confident about this upcoming round, the third round, which is why he did show up. Boris Johnson, as I say, it's more likely than not that he will be Prime Minister, because he'll be elected leader of the Conservative Unionist Party, and then Theresa May will stand down, give her official advice to Her Majesty the Queen in her resignation interview saying, I advise you to appoint Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. He's leader of the Conservative Party. He can command the confidence of the House of Commons. And the Queen will send for him and he will kiss hands, which simply means he very lightly brushes her hands with his lips, and that's that. He's appointed Prime Minister. Only there's nothing that's signed, there's no document, there's no prime ministerial oath. So Bojo, what would a Bojo prime ministership entail? I think he would appoint most of his rivals to the cabinet, not Michael Gove, because the two mightily loathe each other. All right, they both went to Oxford, they're both president of the Oxford Union, they're both Fleet Street journalists, and they were bosom buddies and they were Brexit comrades until 2016 when what's his name, Michael Gove, famously played Brutus. He backstabbed Bojo, as he probably thought he was going to be a tyrant, as it were, and having agreed to be his campaign manager, spoke against him, said he's highly irresponsible. So I think that won't work well for Michael Gove. As Heseltine said, whoever wields the knife never wears the crown. So Bojo will cast him into the outer darkness, and rightly so. Gove is loathsome. I don't know a single person who likes him. Obviously, he acknowledged that he used to snort cocaine 20 years ago, at the same time as writing columns where saying he rejected the liberal London consensus about drugs, and that people ought to be prosecuted for possession of drugs and indeed incarcerated. And now, obviously, he was then Education Secretary, Michael Gove, and during that time, if you were a teacher and you were caught in possession of anything like cannabis, even in your free time, that was it. You were sacked. You're banned from working for minors for life. And if you've been caught possessing cannabis, for instance, years before, that was always recorded. You have to do a criminal records bureau check to work with minors in any capacity as a teacher, police officer, doctor, nurse, anything like that. And you wouldn't necessarily be banned for that. You might be banned, but even if you could go ahead and work and teach, it would always come up. Every time you apply for a job or every 2 years standard review of your criminal record. And if that's there, it's a disadvantage. Shall I employ this person? No, I won't take a risk. I'll employ somebody who's got no record. Shall I promote this person even if they're I think not. So it was a massive disadvantage that was never wiped, no matter how long ago it was, no matter how trifling. So you think you shouldn't be allowed to teach if you've ever smoked cannabis, but you should be allowed to be in charge of the whole education system. The hypocrisy was staggering and nauseating. Now, he did say there's a worse sin than hypocrisy, and that is trying to reject moral standards just because he falls short of him. I do have some sympathy on this position that, for example, to some extent, I think that a mother and a father bringing up a child is probably better on the whole than a single parent if that's workable. There's some fantastic single parents, and not all couples are great together. But I'm not saying what my private situation is. But even though I think that would be better, I'm not guaranteeing that I've achieved that myself. Anyway, he's loathed. The others didn't really savage each other, but they were tearing strips out of Bojo. They weren't too cruel because that might generate sympathy for him. So Rory Stewart, he comes across as very earnest. Remember, he was a Labour Party member for 1 year way back in the 90s, but that wasn't used against him. Sajid Javid, he played the race card well. I can't blame him. It's an advantage. You might as well use it. Saying, look at me, I'm the son of Pakistani immigrant parents, and I represent modern multiracial Britain. We've got to reach out to people who didn't vote for us previously, more ethnic minority people, more people on low incomes, and so on. I think Jeremy Hunt comes across as the most prime ministerial. He's got the looks. He's certainly not fat. They say obese people are perceived as having no self-control. He's got this picture-perfect lifestyle. He's married to a China woman. He's been highly successful in business, the richest of them there. He was head boy of his school, Charterhouse. So there's a real head boy type, as in responsible, a bit on the banal side, but, stellar academic career, never put a foot wrong, perhaps not so square that people wouldn't respect him, all the rest of it. So, Rory Stewart is at 43 as the youngest. He's got a glittering career behind him, apart from Eton and Oxford, was a Foreign Office diplomat, some sort of district commissioner in Iraq after the liberation, private tutor to Prince William, but he's discreet about that. He refuses to divulge anything about his time with the royal family. Maybe there's some NDA, or maybe it's just sheer honour. So that's that. But if Bojo did become PM, he would be in a bind. He's ruled out calling an early election, but you can't trust Bojo's promises at all. And I've previously outlined the ones he's reneged on. And then Emily Maitlis rightly read out one of his columns, threw Bojo's words back at him. 2007, Gordon Brown took over as Prime Minister from Tony Blair, and Gordon Brown didn't call an early election. It proved to be a fatal mistake. Had Brown done it in September 2007, he would have won. Labour was a little bit ahead in the polls. The Conservatives under Cameron were not making progress. They performed poorly in the Southall by-election. But Labour was millions of pounds in debt, and Brown bottled it. And obviously then came Northern Rock imploded, and then came the credit crunch and all the rest of it. And so they ended up losing. So must bitterly regret that. It's like Jim Callaghan not going early in the autumn of 1978. But if you read the tea leaves, the best time for an incoming Prime Minister in this situation to call an election is immediately. You're on a honeymoon. As Blair said, when you become Prime Minister, your popularity is at the top and your experience is at the bottom. By the end of your time, it's flipped. In a sense, you're a better Prime Minister because you've learned from your mistakes, but inevitably your popularity is only going to go one way. Now, it can go up a bit in the middle, but over time, the general tendency is down. Now, Enoch Pearl said all political careers end in failure. Not quite true, but they end in unpopularity usually. You seldom bow out if you're fantastically popular. So, yeah, he might as well call an election immediately because of the honeymoon. And how's he going to handle Brexit? That's sure to end in disappointment. If you leave without a deal, there'll be a lot of ructions. Some people will be furious. If you don't leave at all, many people will be irate. Remember, this is a vital issue to a lot of people. 24% of people voted for Brexit, the Brexit party in the European elections, for a party with no manifesto at all that was only cobbled together a couple of months before. So those people would mostly otherwise vote Conservative. So they would even stand at the forthcoming general election if Brexit is not sorted out. So that's why, in a way, the best thing to do would be to hold an election immediately. The Brexit Party wouldn't do as well in a Westminster election as a European election. People's voting behaviour partly depends on what legislative they're voting for. When they're voting for the European Parliament, they think about the EU issue mostly, which favours the Brexit Party and the Lib Dems. When they're voting for Westminster elections, they think of Westminster issues more. And also, Labour might dump Corbyn and get a more credible leader. They could scarcely get one who's less credible. The question you've got to ask yourself about Corbyn is, can you see him in Downing Street? Would you want to see him in Downing Street? And a lot of people who are broadly sympathetic to Labour wouldn't. He's highly controversial within the Labour Party. Remember, the majority of Labour MPs wanted to boot him out. So he might do that despite these protestations. There are obviously downsides to causing the immediate election, not least the Brexit Party would stand. If Brexit is achieved somehow, then the Brexit Party wouldn't stand in a forthcoming Westminster election in another 3 years. Even though there was a bad Brexit, a very soft Brexit, the Brexit Party might stand, but they would have a little traction, so they might disappear. And the thing is, there was obviously a referendum, then there was an early election. As Bojo said, nobody wants another early election. But he might think if he's going to be Downing Street's occupant for a considerable period of time, he might as well go quickly while Labour's still in disarray before the Liberal Democrats' popularity has time to recover. Obviously, the Lib Dems did very well in the European elections because they've got a clear position. They're seen as the Remain party. So, but Bojo, as I said, he is a man who is not burdened by any scruples or any ideas, in a sense. I can imagine him completely backtracking on Brexit. He's performed a volte-face on other issues, so, there could be an about-face on not holding an election, as I pointed out. He's turned through 180 degrees on gay marriage and loads of things. Anyway, like Heathrow, and he wouldn't give a clear answer about that one. Remember, he was going to lie down in front of a bulldozer to stop it. He loves speaking in imagery. So he is an opportunist. He is a showman. Now, I know politicians just trim, but this is beyond that. One of my friends stood for Parliament 9 years ago in a marginal constituency. He was a Conservative against Labour. I shan't say where it was. But anyway, the Labour government was going to shut the local hospital, which was a very hot local issue. And this Conservative candidate campaigned against it. I said, come on, if there was a Conservative administration, they would shut that hospital too, wouldn't they? And he said, well, that's true, but, it's such a big issue locally. I'd be mad not to jump on the bandwagon. It didn't actually do quite so well for him, because in a year where the Conservatives made major gains, he managed to turn a Labour majority of 5,000 into a Labour majority of 10,000, which is very galling, having given up every weekend for 3 years. You've got to be really committed. So Bojo is the perfect intersection of egotism and unprincipled showboating. But there we are. So, I mean, I still think he'll win. He didn't do quite so well this time. But remember, at this stage, the electorate is only Conservative members of Parliament. And having narrowed it down to 2, then, of course, it will be up to, who is it? Up to the Conservative members, up to ordinary Conservative Party members. So of the last 7 in the race, 6 of them went to Oxford. We've now obviously only got 5 in the race. 4 of them went to Oxford. 2 of these 5 went to Eton. All males, 4 out of 5 white. Those are the demographics. Interestingly, women fell at the first hurdle. Andrea Leadsom and Esther McVeigh. Andrea Leadsom, who was coming second last time, completely out of her depth, not credible at all. So I suppose it was very easy for Theresa May against her. Well, that's that. As I still say, I still think that Bojo's got a good chance. The thing is, what are the Remainers going to do? Stewart is the most one who's inclined to remain. So 3 out of the remaining 5 campaign for Remain, but Stewart said we must absolutely rule out a hard Brexit. But as others like Hunter pointed out, well, then you paint yourself into a corner, all right? You give up your trump card. And remember, Rob, we talked about proroguing Parliament. He's gone, and Stewart said Parliament's not a building. We can meet anyway, even if you don't agree. I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure it would be legally binding. Actually, Parliament meets when summoned by the Queen. If MPs turn up together in the pub, even 650 of them, that's not Parliament, and their proceedings have no constitutional standing. So there we are. And I'm just trying to think who will be eliminated next. Difficult to say. Probably Jarvid, actually.